Hey, how's it going, captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I have a very interesting game. This is a classic showdown between the Kaga and Saipan. Now, it seems to me that a very common player mentality on World of Warships, regardless of what class of ships you play, whether it's battleships, cruisers, destroyers, or in this case, carriers, people just assume that they can't do anything against an opponent who has a better ship than yours. In this case, I have the Kaga, and I'm facing the Saipan. The Saipan is the #1 carrier to counter the Kaga. Not only that, she is better than me. She is a very strong Saipan player. She strafes better than me. She does perfect torpedo drops. But although I could just stubbornly send my planes out and feed the Saipan and also feed her with my bombers, I don't do that. Some players like to do that because they just assume the end result is that the Saipan is going to win against them. I'm going to employ tactic and strategy to overcome the situation, because a good carrier player is not about how good they can strafe, not how good they can drop their bombs. It is about their ability to make the least mistake and also employ strategy. This Saipan player does not have that. So you're about to witness me get trashed on, because apparently people want to see me get trashed on by another carrier player. So first things first, I send both of my fighters to the west side of the map. I send both my torpedo bombers to the east side and one of my dive bombers to the west with my fighters. I noticed that the enemy Saipan sent both of her torpedo bombers and fighters onto the west side of the map. Now, unfortunately, I did not expect the Saipan to go for a quick attack on the shot horse, and this attack is a perfect run. Since my planes are pretty slow, I couldn't make it there in time. But I'm going to try to shoot some planes down, because I know for a fact that the Saipan has a small hangar capacity. The Saipan is going to engage my fighters, and I am pretty much guaranteed to lose this dogfight. At this exact moment, I know for a fact that both of her fighters are on the west side of the map, which means that both my torpedo bombers have the go-ahead to strike a cruiser, battleship, or destroyer. But the Saipan made a big error. Like I said, the player who makes the least amount of mistakes is the one who's going to succeed as a carrier player. The Saipan made a big mistake. She sent both of her fighters to the west side of the map without scouting the north, which is where my torpedo bombers are at. If I had the choice between to strike the battleships and the Saipan, I would strike the Saipan, because Saipan is my #1 enemy. I'm going for the torpedo run, and I'm going to punish her for that. Now, you would assume that, well, that's game over. I'm going to have a walk through the park. Yeah, no. The Saipan is still alive. A 1% Saipan is the same thing as a 100% HP Saipan. Why? Because she can still send her deadly fighters out to farm my fighters and my torpedo bombers. Which means that you can view this as a successful attack, but it isn't really successful because the Saipan isn't dead. Now, one advantage I have over the Saipan that I know of is that every one perfect strike with the Kaga is equivalent to 2 to 3 strikes with the Saipan. But the Saipan has the advantage with the quality planes and better fighters. So I'm going to have to think up of another attack. Now, of course, if I were in the shoes of the enemy Saipan, psychologically, I'm going to use my fighters to protect my carrier, because I just got punished by the enemy Saipan. I am ahead of the Saipan somewhat because I got a really good attack. But the Saipan will eventually catch up if I don't make something happen. Since I know for a fact that the enemy Saipan is using her fighters to protect her own ship, that means she is not protecting her friendly fleet, which gives me the go-ahead to go for another strike on a enemy ship. That isn't the Saipan because I know the Saipan is protecting herself with her own fighter. I spot the Gneisenau now, who is wide open in the ocean. At this exact moment, I send my dive bomber to the back of the map. Why? Well, I'm about to execute 2 attacks simultaneously. The first attack is going to be with my torpedo bombers. Then I'm going to use my dive bombers. Like I said, I know for a fact that the Saipan is guarding herself with her own fighters. This is a game of chess, and every move you make will have a consequence. And in this case, I got this Saipan in the corner. She has to make a choice between to protect her own ships or protect herself. I'm going to use my torpedo bombers to attack that Gneisenau and lure out the Saipan fighters. Notice how the Saipan fighters isn't on the map or spotted. I'm going for the strike on the Gneisenau, and you're about to see me piss off the Gneisenau. Gneisenau is going for a radical turn to port, which is perfect because then I can have my torpedo bombers position, and this looks like a good strike. Now, like I said, the enemy Saipan is a very strong player, and she reacts right away. At this exact moment, simultaneously, she let her guard down, and now I'm going to send my dive bombers in. Notice how I just use strategy here? She is short by 1 fighter because she's going to try to finish off my torpedo bomber. This Saipan is now somewhat open because there is only 1 fighter that I have not spotted, and that fighter happens to be with the Saipan. Now, it's too late because she already made the mistake of sending her fighter to the Gneisenau, which is why, pretty much, checkmate. Saipan is dead. I magically pissed off 2 people simultaneously. Yes, I just beat a Saipan player, a player who just trashed on my zeros in the first half of the game. The point I'm trying to draw here is that a lot of people think that just because you have a better ship doesn't always mean that you're going to win every battle. Because the heart of any ship, whether you play battleship, destroyer, carrier, or cruiser, is the captain. It is the captain's ability to overcome these challenges. It would be nice to have a good ship, but it isn't always the case because everyone who plays World of Warships long enough will play a very poor ship. And I managed to take out the Saipan and time it correctly. Now, what could the Saipan do? What could she have done better? Well, number one of the most important strategy and skill as a carrier player, like I said, it's fundamental to know how to strafe, it's fundamental to drop torpedoes, but it is important to scout because carriers, one of the biggest strengths of carriers is your ability to scout the map. Because you have planes. Planes are faster than destroyers. Planes, you can use them. Not your destroyer. You can't just use your destroyer and expect to respawn after dying when you spot the entire enemy fleet. What the Saipan player should have done was split her fighters and send 1 fighter west and 1 fighter north. 1 fighter can deal with both of my 2 zeros, my 2 zero squadrons. Now, of course, I am expected to win against the single fighter squadron because if I can get the lock on the enemy Saipan squadron, then yeah, I win the battle. But remember, the Saipan has the plane speed, which means that she wouldn't engage in that situation. But since she was too focused about escorting her torpedo bombers, she neglected the scouting in the beginning of the match, which means that I punish her with my torpedo bomber. Now, of course, she sends her fighters back and adjusts the situation because she just learned her lesson that she should have protected her carrier or at least scout from my bombers. At this exact moment, she made another mistake to not look for more dive bombers. She actually spotted my dive bombers in the beginning of the match, but she completely ignored it. And when she sent her fighters to her carriers, that gave me the opening to strike a enemy ship. And it's pretty much, basically, I'm playing like a regular Kaga. I'm just looking for ships to sink. She has to make a decision to either protect her team or protect her carrier, and that is a rough position to be in. She decides to try to protect her teammates at the same time protect her carrier. What she should have done was send one fighter to search for my dive bomber. And I always keep track of bombers when I can. Now, of course, not all the time I keep track of the enemy's movement, but like I said, it's very important to get information, count the planes, count the destroyers, count the battleships, who is going on this side of the map, pick a target. Those are things that are very important, but a lot of people like to value how to do perfect drops, how to do perfect strafe, how to win air battles. That only works against players who just don't think outside the box. Of course, they just, click on the fighters and fight without thinking. I make specific decisions, I make specific sacrifices. I sacrifice my 2 squadrons of zeros just to get a good strike on the Saipan. I win with my torpedo bombers to strike the Gneisenau. To make that decision, the Saipan has to also make a decision to protect the Gneisenau, but she was too late. She made another mistake, and I strike out the Saipan with my dive bombers. That is something that I always believe. It's always strategy. Yes. What happens if I face a really good Saipan player who knows how to scout? What if she did scout? Well, then I will not attack any ships at that moment. All I have to do is wait for the Saipan to make a move, because she's going to have to attack a ship with her torpedo bomber. The moment she attacks a ship with her torpedo bomber, I'm going to shoot down her torpedo bomber at my best, and that's going to affect her ability to do damage, which means that she's going to use her fighters to escort the torpedo bombers. At that exact moment, I'm going to find a ship to strike, which is the opening that I need. There's a lot of things that can happen in the game, and a lot of people think it's just straightforward. Sacrifice your plane, make an attempt to rush attack, and that isn't always the case. You should really think outside the box, and that is how you succeed as a carrier player. At this point, this is just a walk through the park, and I'm just farming damage, because since we have a carrier, which is me, especially when I'm playing the Kaga, we're pretty much guaranteed to win. Not always, but guaranteed to win, because I can do massive amount of damage against the enemy, and the enemy at the same time, they are dispersed, and they are not that great with the anti-air. We got Nagatos, we got some Japanese cruisers. Yeah, you already guessed what this game is going to end. Aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.